All right, young true believers, welcome to chapter 4. This is the chapter on credibility and advertising. Now, in many respects, this might be the most important chapter of the entire course, right? And this first part that we're going to concern ourselves being, we're going to examine two things. We're going to examine A, the credibility of a claim itself, and B, the credibility of the people who are making the claim, right? The source of the claim. So, claims lack credibility to the extent. Hang on, I got a motorcycle flying down the street. All right, claims lack credibility to the extent they conflict with our observations, experience, or background information, or to the extent that they come from sources that lack credibility. So let's explain all of that. If I tell you that ducks communicate by quacking in Morse code, you're going to reject that claim out of hand because you know, right, based on your personal experience with ducks, right, that they don't quack in Morse code. If I tell you that horses routinely fly, you're going to reject that claim because, again, this is not consistent with your own observations, right? So this leads us to an extremely important concept, and we're going to make reference to this throughout the semester: background information. Background information refers to the sum total, the aggregate, if you will, of what you know based on your direct experience, your own personal experience, and your formal education. So it's an instant appeal or an instant check with your background information that leads you to reject the claim that, again, ducks quack in Morse code, or that horses routinely fly, right? All right. Now, you check these claims again. Initially, you check these claims against your background information, and based on that, you give them what's known as you give them an initial plausibility, right? Initial plausibility, right, is a rough assessment of how credible a claim actually is, right? So again, the initial plausibility, let's say it lies on a scale of 1 to 10, with um, 1 being the president is an interdimensional shape-shifting reptilian being, right? This is actually a genuine conspiracy, right? Conspiracy theory. Or 10 being water is H2O, or I don't know, San Jose is a city in California, right? Um, so the initial plausibility that you would give a statement like horses fly would be a 1, right? The initial plausibility that you would give ducks communicate by quacking in Morse code is probably also a 1, right? Um, the initial plausibility that you would give a claim like, I don't know, a human being has bench pressed over 700 pounds would probably be a 5 or a 6, right? You'd have to check, but it seems at least plausible. The plausibility that you would give to the claim that somebody has run a mile in less than 3 minutes would probably be a 3 or a 4, something like that, roughly, right? But that's what you do with every claim that you hear. You give it an initial plausibility. How likely is this claim to be true, right? And again, you check that against your background information. Now, this might be the most important thing you're going to learn in this class, right? We're talking about sources of claims now. The sources that must be viewed with the most suspicion, right? The sources that you need to be exercising your critical thinking abilities the most against, right, are what are known as interested parties. What's an interested party? An interested party is someone or some persons who stand to benefit from your accepting a claim, right? Anybody that stands to benefit from your accepting a claim. And the two parties that are most interested, right, the ones that you need to be most suspicious about, or at least perhaps suspicious is too strong a word, the two parties that you need to exercise your critical thinking skills most ardently with respect to are advertisers and politicians, right? Chevy is going to tell you, if you're a man, that you need a pickup truck because it's manly to have a pickup truck. You need to exercise your critical thinking skills or your critical thinking abilities and say, okay, am I a farmer? No. Am I a general contractor? No. Do I work in construction? No. Do I need a pickup truck? No. Right? Politicians, obviously, are going to make a variety of claims. It's your job as a critical thinker to scrutinize those claims, right, and make sure that they hold up, right? Here's the most important thing you're going to learn in this class, where if it's not the most important, it's top 3, right? Interested parties are always to be regarded with more suspicion than our disinterested parties. A disinterested party, obviously, is going to be someone who doesn't stand to gain from your accepting a claim, right? So if someone has a stake in you accepting a claim, again, you need to be very careful. It doesn't mean they're out to rip you off, but they certainly have more incentive to do that than a disinterested party would. All right. Doubts about sources generally fall into 2 categories: doubts about the source's knowledge or expertise, and doubts about the source's veracity. That's a fancy word for truthfulness, right? Objectivity and accuracy. All right, what is expertise? Expertise is extensive training in extensive training, education, or experience in a given field. I'm an expert in philosophy, right? Stephen Hawking was an expert in physics, right? LeBron James is an expert in basketball, right? How do you assess someone's expertise? Degrees, right? Years of practice in a given discipline, right? I mean, there's no such thing as a degree in basketball, but LeBron James has been playing the game for almost 15, 16 years now, right? So it's safe to say, based on his extensive experience, he knows something about it, right? Experts are generally the most reliable sources for claims, but this is extremely important. Expertise can occasionally be purchased, right? So there's a selection about this in a text, but I'll give you a little bit from the late 80s, early 90s. There were Congress was holding hearings in the late 80s, early 90s, with in which they were asking the heads, the CEOs of tobacco companies, whether or not they were aware that their products cause cancer, heart disease, emphysema, etc., right? And so what the tobacco companies did is they hired scientists and paid them well to stand before Congress and essentially say they could find no link between their products and cancer and high blood pressure and emphysema and congestive heart failure, etc., right? So here's another example. This is from the text on page 106. In the 1960s and 1970s, a national concern arose about the relationship between the consumption of sugar and several serious conditions, including diabetes and heart disease. An artificial sweetener, cyclamate, was introduced to replace sugar in sodas and the other products. The sugar industry, afraid of lost sales, countered with an assault on cyclamates, and Dr. John Hickson led the charge. Later, when Hickson was research director of the Cigar Research Council, apparently there's a Cigar Research Council, right? He was described in a confidential memo as, quote, a supreme scientific politician who had been successful in condemning cyclamates on behalf of the Sugar Research Council on somewhat shaky evidence. The substance was banned by the Food and Drug Administration in 1969, right? The moral of the story is that politics and interested parties with deep pockets can and do influence scientific findings that are supposed to be entirely objective, right? Remember, expertise can be bought. So there's no substitute, right, for good, diligent background checking and research. If you're a good critical thinker, you need to do this, right? Especially, again, when you're dealing with an interested party like, say, sugar manufacturers or tobacco manufacturers. So on Wednesday, I will talk to you about the media.